Imagine being so intensely called by something inexplicable that you find yourself leaving behind the scaffolding of a life you once believed had form, meaning, and purpose. Well, that was the reality for Ra Uru Hu, once known as Robert Allan Krakower, before human design found him, or as he described it, fell through him. My name is Mark Roach, and this is Transcendent. Welcome to a space for self-authenticity, where sometimes the ideas we explore might unsettle you. My perspective has been shaped by a lifetime of challenges and growth. And if you're here, I hope this will stir something deep within you as well. Through my own twisted path across highs and lows, I've come to believe that the key to who you are isn't in building a new facade, but in discovering what lies beneath the layers that you may already be wearing. Today, I want to talk about this man who embodied this ethos from his very core long before his work became a global phenomenon. We're exploring the quiet, humble, disorientating foundations of Ra Uru Hu's work before the world came calling. Ra's story begins not with clarity, but with chaos, adrift. A man untethered, carried by currents that most of us would find terrifying. Before human design found him in 1987, he was what one might call a bystander in his own life. He lived with the weight of questions many of us ask but rarely dare to pursue, to the very edges of our existence. Like, who am I? Why am I here? What is the truth, really? Well, when he found himself on the island of Ibiza, or perhaps more accurately, lost himself there, he wasn't chasing enlightenment. He wasn't setting out to become anyone of note or of influence. He was, in his own words, simply surviving, a shadow of a man who had yet to meet his own light. One evening, during what he later described as an 8-day and 8-night encounter with something far beyond the scope of conventional comprehension, Ra called it a voice. This wasn't a mystical metaphor or an imagined presence. It was, to him, an undeniable, mechanical, clear transmission of knowledge, downloaded into his being without any prior context, preparation, or even desire for such an event. He didn't believe it. Not then. Not even later, really. What he did do, though, was experiment with it. And this is perhaps one of the most important lessons you can take from Ra's initial encounter with human design. He didn't preach belief. He advocated experimentation. He said, "Don't believe me." He would later say in his teachings, "I don't want believers. I want people to experiment with their own lives." This foundation that you don't need to trust, accept, or blindly follow anything set him apart from so many systems that demand automatic obedience to an ideology. Instead, he handed a tool to us, something mechanical, something tangible, something for you to test and prove or disprove through your own experience. That, he said, was the only truth that mattered. But arriving at such clarity wasn't easy for him. Imagine carrying an unasked for burden, an entire system of knowledge, and yet having no blueprint yourself for how to contain it or communicate it. Ra lived in isolation for years, wrestling with what had been entrusted to him. He would later speak about this time as an almost surgical removal of who he thought he was. Layers stripped back, beliefs dismantled, conditioning, cultural, personal, societal, peeled away to reveal the raw, unadorned mechanics of his existence. Deconditioning became the heart of every life that he touched. Ra described our layers of conditioning as cages. These are the inherited beliefs, fears, and expectations written into us by the world, often drowning out our true essence. The gift of human design, as he saw it, wasn't to give people something new to fit into. It was to help them see themselves as they always had been, underneath the noise. But this period of discovery didn't come without a cost. How do you frame something so sophisticated yet resonant, yet shocking to most? Well, when Ra began sharing human design, it wasn't to small gatherings, or when Ra began sharing human design, it was to small gatherings where he would encourage questioning, thinking, exploring, never preaching. His intention wasn't to plant flags or build empires. It was to offer what he knew and how to allow others to decide cleanly and clearly what they would do with it. He was always clear about its origin. This isn't mine, he said. This is mechanical information. It changes nothing. It explains everything. It's not a paradox, if you really lean into those words. The system doesn't change your life because it is simply a mirror. But within that reflection, there is profound power if you dare to look. Ra Uru Hu's human design system arrived in the world like a quiet, steady hum before it grew into anything else. Through its gates and channels, types and authorities, profiles and definitions, what he really offered was a way for people to meet themselves, not their conditioned performance, but their true, unadulterated essence. This for Ra was the revolution, not transformation through striving or changing, but liberation through understanding, understanding that you are who you are, perfectly equipped to play your role in this life as long as you stop trying to play someone else's. For many, that's an uncomfortable idea. We live in a world that champions change as the solution. New habits, new goals, new identities. But Ra offered a daring proposition of not changing and of instead allowing, experimenting, witnessing, rather than endlessly tweaking. It wasn't a blueprint for success, notoriety, or wealth. It was a mechanism for aligning what had always been there. And in those previous early days, before human design was a movement, before it was the language of seekers across continents, it was simply a man sitting with the depth and weight of knowledge that shook him awake. It was a man fumbling, as we all do, not to create meaning, but to perceive the meaning that was always etched into his design. I'm Mark Roach, and this is Transcendent, wishing you all the best on your discovery of who you've always been.